Hello, my YouTube friends. So, you ever see videos of the trading exchange and wonder how it all works and what's going on and just looks like total chaos? Well, stick around. I was asked to talk a little bit about my experience on the floor, and that's what I'm going to do today. Good morning. My name is Adam Kahn, and this is Investing with Adam K. Also, think of myself still as a rational investor. So I'm pretty excited to talk about my experiences trading and working on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. One of the people in the comments asked me if I could talk about it a little. It was a really neat experience, so I'm happy to share it, and hopefully a few of you out there are kind of curious how it all works as well. When I graduated college, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I had interned at Merrill Lynch and thought I wanted to be a stockbroker, but the internship honestly made me realize that that's exactly what I didn't want to do. I wanted to be involved in the markets. I had an older brother who had graduated a few years back, and he had done a bunch of things for a while, and eventually had worked his way to Chicago and had gotten a job at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. When I kind of asked him about that, his answers was he knew he wanted to work at one of the exchanges, and if he came back to New York, that's where we grew up. He kind of wanted to change from life and be away from family and friends and experience new things. So he gravitated towards Chicago, where they had an exchange. When I graduated, he suggested to me that maybe I should come out to Chicago and see what it looked like because he thought it was pretty cool. And I can tell you from the moment I walked down there for my first interview, I couldn't believe it. It looked so incredible. I get brought down to the floor and I'm looking around and all the numbers up on the boards and everything else and all the chaos going on. I was immediately like drawn to it. It just looks so neat to me. Now I'm going to go through everything that I did and the different positions I had and everything else in an attempt to try to really explain what goes on down there. Because what I tell people is, people kind of look from the stands, and if you've ever watched the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where you see the guys down there, that's exactly what I did. Some of the people in that movie are the traders are actually people I worked with, so it's kind of cool when I see it and I'm like, hey, there's Jimmy, which is actually really one of the guys in it. So it's really cool. And even the clips on CNBC, which you might be less familiar with, especially because I haven't seen them in years, but when they used to show them, they were old clips. One of the guys, Bryce, who we used to work with, he was constantly who they were right on. And it was the same clip over and over again, even though they made it seem like that was a different clip when they would use it, which I always thought was kind of funny. Anyway, so I'm going to go through each position, what I did, and everything else to try to give a better understanding of what goes on. Because if I didn't say it and I'm repeating it, what I try to explain to people is when you're looking at it on those programs and everything else, and it looks like such chaos, and how does anybody know what's going on? Well, if you saw a basketball game or a football game and didn't know the rules and just saw a bunch of people running around throwing a ball, like that would look like chaos too. It really isn't chaos. You just don't know the rules and what people are doing and understand what's actually going on. So that's why it looks so chaotic. But just like a sporting event, it totally makes sense. And once you understand it and what people's roles are and what they're doing, it all ties together. So my first job was essentially working at the order desk where orders come over a computer, they print out, they hand them to guys on the side. They look at the order, they see what the order is for. And I don't mean what their quantities or prices or anything else. I worked in the currency quadrant, so what I'm looking at is what currency is the trade for? Is it an order for yen, or at the time D-marks, which became the euro dollar, but Swiss franc, British pounds, Canadian dollars, Aussie dollars, things like that. And depending on which one it is, I then take the order, and you can't run, but you walk as quick as you can to that pit, hand off that order for the order filler to be able to fill it. So all the people you see walking around the outside in yellow coats, because yellow coats determine that it's a clerk, not a trader. Traders can wear whatever they want for a coat. So you see all sorts of colors and different things going on, but those are just traders. Yellow coats are clerks. So all the yellow clerks walking around on the outside as quickly as they can, they're typically handing a piece of paper to the other people in the yellow coats on the outside of the pits who work for brokers who fill orders. They hand those tickets in. The clerk in the yellow coat determines if that's an order that they need to hand to their broker right away, or if it's something they put into their stack for them to be able to get to as the markets move. If it's something to fill right away, they hand it to their broker. Their broker reaches into the pit to see where the market is. They do what the order says. They hand it back to the clerk, who hands it back to the other clerk, and then I'll take that back to my order desk for them to report to the clients. From there, I learned all the hand signals, which, hands towards you means you're a buyer, hands away, a seller. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. Um, Touching your face is quantity, away from your face is price. And that's essentially how you would do hand signals to put orders into the pit. On your chin is 1 through 9, on your forehead is tens, a fist is 100. Those are how you see, and that doesn't mean anything. But that's how you actually see the guys on the phones that are doing all these weird things with their hands to put the orders into the pit. It works the same way. They're doing those hand signals to the guys on the outside of the pit in the yellow jackets, who are then turning to the order fillers, telling them what to do. Um, and then they place the orders accordingly based on those hand signals. They use hand signals to tell them back whether they were filled, whether they're still working it, whether they'll get to it later. The people on the phones are talking directly to essentially, financial planner type people or brokers, but not the same way as the brokers in the pit that I'll refer to later, that have customers, or maybe potentially a really large customer who has direct access to being able to call to the phone. The advantage of the phone in filling orders versus the ones that are just the paper orders at the desk is the immediacy. So if it's somebody who has a lot of clients and they need to buy something or sell something at the market, they call somebody on the phone. They can know exactly where the markets are trading right now. They can place those orders, have immediate response, and be able to report that to their clients or whomever it is, whether it's an investment company or things like that. So all the people you see on the outside standing in the booths and everything else, they're waiting for the phones to ring from their different clients that are essentially, what you think of as a financial planner or broker or things like that, for them to place the orders, for them to put it in the pit, to respond and give it back to the clients. Hopefully you're with me so far. Now, that was my second job. My next job is I worked for a guy who was a trader in the pit. This was my first step to trying to get to trade. So it was exciting for me. Now, he traded yen options. I figured I'd learn about it. My brother was at the options exchange, the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, where he was looking into stock options. He had originally started at the Mercantile Exchange as me, but in the S&P quadrant while I was upstairs in the currencies. I was pretty excited for this job, and I probably worked for, his name was Nick, for about a month or two. And along those times, essentially my job role for him is Nick would buy and sell the options, and then he had to hedge them with the futures. So if he made his trade in the options, he would tell me he needs to, buy six. It was sorry, buy 6 yen futures to hedge against what he had done in the options pit. So I would give that to the clerk. They would hedge for him, and we would work the orders from there. Well, he was also doing stuff in the Swiss franc pit. He saw that I was interested in the future stuff and probably noticed that I wasn't really understanding the option side of it, even though I found it interesting. I was much more interested in the futures. They moved a lot more. Um, and what he suggested to me is, if I have an idea that I wanted to do in the futures fit, feel free to put that trade on. Well, I would watch each day, and I was probably making, 4 to 6 trades for him a day, and I was having really good success. What shocked me about this is this got me fired. And in my head, all I kept thinking is, I keep making two, three, $400 a day for you. And, I was pretty new, so this was a ton of money at the time, and you fired me for it. And the discussion was, that wasn't really what he had in mind. He thought if I was like looking at charts and had an idea that a certain currency was going higher in the long term or lower in the long term, that I would put on a trade, not that I would see the markets and try to take advantage of short term moves. So here I was, pretty much unemployed. Now, Nick told me I could work with him for a little while, so at least I had some income, but I was annoyed enough that I kind of said, forget it. Asked around the same day and found a job to work as a clerk in the yen options pit, because that's kind of how it works. Once you're on the floor, you start to meet people and you build relationships like any other job that you're doing, and you're able to bounce around a bit. But I was really frustrated because I thought, geez, I was pretty good at this. All at the same time, my brother and I were trying to save up money to be able to trade. We figured when we saved up money, since he had more experience, he would go in first. And then once he hopefully made some money, that I could go in as well. Now, you needed to make $50,000 because you needed to put up a $50,000 T bill in order to trade. And from there, even if all you had was about $5,000, you could go in whatever pit you decide and have access and be able to make trades. So there I am working as a clerk in the yen options pit, and we had saved enough, and my brother was going through the process of getting ready to trade. And I get a call from my brother who says, so what do you think? Would you like to start trading? I'm like, what are you talking about? Now, I'd only been down there maybe a year at most. And basically, he had gotten an offer from a guy who would put up the money to allow him to trade. And his thought is, why doesn't he take that offer? And we'll use the money that we had saved up for him to back me to go into the pits. Now, I was scared to death. And I'll go back to explaining how the pits work when you're looking at it as well. And I guess that was it, though. It was time to go through the process of going through membership, getting a badge, learning whatever it was about the intricacies of the pit, or deciding what pit I wanted to trade in, and I picked the Yen Futures pit. So back to the makeup of the pit. Remember the yellow coats all on the outside, the other ones running around and everything else. You then see all the different colored coats in the pit. The outer circle are what are called brokers. Those are people who are filling customer orders. They don't trade their own accounts. They essentially stand on the sides of the pit outside, waiting for their clerks or the paper orders to come in for them to reach in the pit and look to guys that are called locals. Locals are guys who make the markets, bid and ask. That's kind of determines what the price of each future is. And that's what I ended up doing. I went in the pit, I was trading my own account, and you wait for the orders from the customers to come in so that you can take the other side of the orders. The way that you determine where the price of the markets is and what the real advantage of the floor is takes a little time to figure out. Basically, the longer you trade in a pit, you start to, and it doesn't take too long, you start to know who's who. And the guys who work for Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, um, Smith Barney, all the companies that you've heard of, even, Merrill Lynch and Fidelity, and well, Fidelity wasn't down there, but Goldman Sachs, things like that, they kind of determine where the market is. The reason they do that is we're trading the yen against the dollar. Well, the dollar yen trades in New York and over computers, and the guys in the pit who work for those companies are on headsets direct with the traders in New York. So they're constantly bidding and offering the market because they really know where the market's trading internationally. And all you have to do in time is get to know who's who in the pit, and you kind of follow along with the banks. Like, it doesn't happen all day, every day, but if all of a sudden all the bank traders are buying, I don't really need to know what's going on to kind of go, I should be buying too. I don't understand. I don't see what's happening. But if Bryce and Mike and all these guys who work for the banks start bidding up the market, well, so will I. So it doesn't become rocket science. And the real skill that you need to have down there is just quick math. If I buy three, do I and sell two and buy another four and sell six? And like you're constantly buying and selling small numbers. You just kind of have to keep in your head what your total position is to try to determine what you need to do to flatten out your position. Beyond just the trading, it's a super cool place. I mean, even the badges. So when I first determined that I was going to start trading, I say to one of the guys who I'm friendly with, what do you think I should get to be my badge? A lot of people just use their initials or whatever else. And you could use 3 to 4 letters if you were lucky. And I ended up with three because somebody already had the fourth of what I wanted. But he goes, "How about you do Slim?" And I thought, okay, it's kind of funny. Why not? Now, Slim was taken as, or because only the first 3 letters are what matter, even if you have a fourth. So a guy Slider had SLI, and I ended up just doing SLM. Now, the funny thing is, if you have a sense of humor, that really helped me when I got into the pit because it's a group like they don't like new people coming in, and not because it's some group trying to cheat anybody else, but there's only so many trades that come in every day, and a new person is competition. Well, that badge, as dumb as it sounds, I can't tell you how many of the traders like to be like, sell you one, Slim. They just thought it was funny, so it really ended up helping me out. But even whether people thought whatever it is they thought, it was such a little club of funniness. They weren't racist or sexist or anything else. They didn't want anybody new in the pit. So breaking in was not the easiest thing. And it's also about trust. You know, People talk about what goes on and people are they were some of the most trustworthy people in the world because what I'll tell you is it's just handwritten trades. So if somebody sells something, I'll sell you two and you've bought them, the market moves. If that's a bad trade, it was just handwritten on a piece of paper. Somebody might just throw it away and pretend it never happened. If you ever did that, you would never get a trade again, and everybody would talk about it. So when you're new, there's a little bit of nervousness of like, will this guy be stand up for their trades when good or bad or anything else? So the trust takes a long time to really build up. And then it's a whole host of characters. I mean, there's Bugs as one of the names, and Harry the Hat, and Solly D, and Joey Nunzi, and like it's this whole cast of characters that are the different traders that day in and day out that you're working with. And then we played jokes on each other. I mean, Harry the Hat was one of the guys who filled orders in the pit. And on one of the days where the market had really moved a whole lot, one of the clerks he's running late and he's in his car, and one of the clerks has the other partner of his give him a call up saying that, hey, yesterday one of the guys made a mistake on one of the orders. This is not true. He's just making it up. And we're short 100 contracts, which is huge. I mean, what I think of when I think of one contract, I think of one contract kind of like 100 shares of a stock in terms of how much the markets move. And he's like, oh, and it's going against him, but your partner is just holding on to it because he hopes it's gonna come back. Now, what you learn early on is when there's a mistake, you just get out because you don't know where the markets are going, especially the brokers, because they're not trading their own account. So of course the guy's freaking out, yelling at them, speeding to get into the office or into the floor, and they just do these things to joke with each other, and you have to be able to take it. There was a guy, and I won't mention his name just because, well, whatever, Scott, who used to work in the pit, and he used to mess with me when I was new. He would make me very uncomfortable as if he liked me, like had a crush on me. And he would come up to me and kind of flirt with me, and really he's doing this to make me mess up, make me lose money. Maybe I leave the pit. Whatever it is that people are doing, they just kind of joke, and you have to be able to handle it in whatever way. So April Fool's comes around, and I have a friend of mine reach out to a lawyer and write up paperwork essentially saying that I'm suing him for sexual harassment. He gets called over the loudspeaker. He goes off the floor, and I'm just trying to keep a straight face because I know what's going on. They essentially say, "You've been served." And he comes back in, face white as a ghost. And really, what I wish when I look back is that I had just left and gone home for the day and let him be nervous about it for a day or two. Maybe an hour or so later, I kind of start laughing, but that eased all of that tension when I was able to make jokes back and just we had fun and you start to just, I don't know, kind of go with the flow and worry about your trades and everything else, it really makes things better. The basics is you're the guys making the market. So in the yen, which right now, boy, I haven't looked at pricing, so it's a total guess. I think it got down in the 60s, like maybe they're in the 66 handle or something, because I know the dollar yen is above 150. It's like 156. Um, but let's say it's 67.54. Well, you might be 67.53 bid at 67.55 offer, meaning you're willing to buy it at 53 and sell it at 55, and you're trying to make those 2 points as often throughout the day. But you're also trying to get a feel on where the market's moving and everything else. Those 2 points are such a huge advantage, and trading from a computer is such a disadvantage. After computers came around, I really stopped trading. But it was really an unbelievable experience. The great was I had so much fun with these guys. I was able to do incredibly well. I had very few losing days. It was amazing from day one I found success. It was super lucky. I think on my first day I made like $700 and was super excited. And then you're able to just grow from there all day, every day. The negative was when I was done trading, I was so spoiled, it was very hard to go out into the real world and find a normal job. Me personally, I found I generally did better when the markets were kind of slow and didn't do a whole lot. I had a pretty good ability to just not get nervous when it got to the highs or the lows because it was really slow and you get to know the personality of the pit that you're trading in. And what tends to happen is when you get near the top of the market is when the buy orders start coming in and people get nervous and get out and you see the volume pick up a little. And same on the other end. And I was patient enough to hold it through those slow day swings when the other guys were used to more action and wouldn't have the patience to sit with it. Sometimes I had a lot of trouble on the really busy action days when everybody else loved it. Now, I will say that one of my best weeks ever was when there was a lot of action going on and the markets were really moving and I just saw it really well. And I mean, I can't, when I think back, it's just unbelievable the amount of money that moves day in and day out. Because I mean, I had a week that it just blows my mind away that that was 1 week of work. And the other thing that's so interesting is as time goes on, like there were plenty of weeks that you got used to the flow of the market that I would go in, the markets would open at 7:20 and I would trade from about 7:20 till 8:30, maybe 9 o'clock because the open was busy. There wasn't a whole lot to do, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes later, and then we would leave and we would come back around 1 or 1:30 to trade the close, which was at 2 o'clock. So you'd work for maybe an hour and a half total. The rest of the day, we'd go to breakfast or walk around the city, or, geez, we were going to the casino boat or just hanging out at a friend's house or whatever, because we didn't want to be there in the middle of the day when it was slow and potentially have a tough time, especially because the beginning half hour or 40 minutes was generally pretty easy and you could do okay for an entire day of work. The other thing is you learn a lot of what I would say are bad habits, but you tend to make money by doing the things that people tell you not to do, like averaging into losers. Over the years, I've learned how terrible an idea this is But on the floor, that just seems to be what you do. Like, if I bought a couple and the market started going lower, I would buy a few more. And if it kept going lower, I would buy more. And eventually it would turn around. I was so stupid and so young, I didn't really realize the risk I was taking on. And that's not a joke. I mean, one of the worst days I ever had, I lost. I'll tell you what happened in that, but and I'll also tell you how much money you're at least about because I really didn't add it all up. I went home so upset. But you just you don't realize, it's funny. The I used to have, on average, I was 20 lot trader, a 10 lot trader. I wasn't one of the huge guys, but I definitely was comfortable taking some positions on. And I probably had 100 or 200 contracts on a few times while I was down there. After I left, I traded from a computer a few times, and 3 or 4 contracts is a rather large position that can make or lose a good amount of money. Like, I would never put on even a 10 lot at this point in my life. And here I was, 25 years old, 26 years old, buying and selling 10s and 20s and maybe even 50 or 100 from time to, like, I was out of my mind, but it was because I didn't know better. I thought I had more control of it than I really did. And thank God, because that's what it gave me the ability to do as well as I did, but out of just sheer stupidity, not out of being smart or good or anything else. So it's really hard for me to give advice to young people or somebody who wants to get into trading because I wouldn't do a lot of the things that I did. As I've transitioned off the exchange and become what I would say more of an investor, that I understand, and that makes a lot more sense to me, which is why I say I just stick with great companies that I'm comfortable owning for a long time. The inner day in and out, and the reason I have a small trading account is it's just part of what I can't, you get it into your system and you can't help it. But the reality is that's probably my worst performing portfolio of the three I have. The one that I just leave alone and own Google and Amazon and the others, like, it does very well in terms of outperforming the market or performing with the market. And the stuff that I day trade, I do okay, but quite honestly, I do it out of habit and out of I watch the markets anyway, and it keeps me in tune with where prices are. But I get emotional just like everybody else, and I might panic sell or pay too high or whatever else. I actually tend to do better with the selling puts to get into positions, which is why I say I've thought of adding that on to even my set it and forget it stuff. So averaging into losing positions, and the reason you shouldn't do this. So uh, as I said, I that's how you kind of made money on the floor, and the market was slowly rallying one day, and I don't remember the exact prices we were, but when I was trading in the yen, it was in a long-term trend that the market was just going lower, similar to how it is now, for years. So what I had learned is anytime it goes higher, you just sell and you keep selling because eventually it just goes back down and you can be profitable. So the market starts drifting up, and I'm short maybe 5 or 10 contracts. As it goes a little higher and end up being maybe short 20, as it pushes through what's called evens or the figures, but let's say it was around 8000 as getting through a new, number, and I sell a few more as it goes. As soon as it trades 10, Freddie Gelderman goes 30 on 300. And one of the guys I work with, Todd, says sold. And I go, sell you 50, Todd. So now I'm short about 80 contracts. And the market hesitates there. They're even coming some offers, maybe down at 25 or 20. And I'm waiting for the market to go lower as I see one of the phone clerks go, I'm 70 bid, I'm 70 bid. And my heart just sunk. Like I was in, I just knew, like I was down so much money in a matter of seconds. I told the story on the interview I did with Ari Gutman. For a while, I tried to kind of just sit and wait, hoping the market would fall. eventually I just gave up, and I literally placed my order with one of the brokers instead of getting out myself because I couldn't even stomach just going in and buying the 80 some odd contracts, and walked off the floor and went home. Um, it was a lot of money, and it probably took me 3 4 months to make that kind of money. I was sitting there feeling really depressed. I returned my coat. I go to get to my car, and I walk outside to go to the parking lot, and there's a homeless guy. There usually was, asking for whether it's food or whatever else. And I literally, like, as I'm looking at him and thinking about my day and how bad I was feeling, eh, I kind of think, well, I'm gonna go back to my condo. I'm gonna have some dinner. I'm gonna go to sleep, and I'm gonna wake up and come back to work tomorrow. Uh, Something about that moment really changed my attitude about how awful it was, recognizing how fortunate I was, which I know sounds kind of silly. And I gave that guy an $100 and walked off and went home. And something about that made me feel better, to where I was able to turn it around. A- and it's not like I made it back that quickly, but I ended up having a pretty good, like, it turned me mentally back around, where my trading was much better afterwards, and I was really disciplined and able to probably make back that loss in about a month and a half or so. Um, but it was a rough day, and reminds me about averaging or trading too big and making sure to keep positions how they should be, because you don't have control of the markets. Nobody does. And then I guess the question must be, what happened? Why don't I still do it? Well, I watched the technology slowly change over the years. In the beginning, like everybody else, I was bidding and offering, and then eventually they had these little earpieces you could wear, and I was one of like 4 or 5 guys who went down and took them. It gave you direct access to be able to hear the traders in New York, so you felt like you totally had maybe a half a second of time where you knew where the market was going before other people, which gave a huge advantage. Now, the other advantage is not just knowing who's who, is there was a general understanding, like, if the banks were moving the market, let's say I was sitting there and I'm offering 2 contracts at 5. You don't really need to know what that means, but I'd be going 2 at 5, 2 at 5. Well, the guys who usually drove the market were the Morgan Stanley traders. If the guy in New York says, "Hey, I'm 5 bid, I'm 5 bid," he didn't say, "I'll buy him, I'll buy him, I'll buy him" from all the guys who were trading their own money. He would just walk in and go, "I'm 5 bid." The reason he did that is he knows that the guys in the pit are really just making market for customer orders. It's not necessarily that they want to sell yen at that 5 price. It's more that they're keeping the market full so that if their order's coming in, the brokers have somebody to go to that they can buy or sell to. And he knows where the market is. So if he's 5 bid, he will just come in and say, "I'm 5 bid." And if you still wanted to sell him your 2, you could. But if you didn't really want to sell it at 5, you could just kind of put your hands down and the markets would move naturally. On the computer, if you put an order in and the market goes up, you're filled. That is a beyond, it's hard to explain how big an advantage that is. The other thing is, since the computer is just numbers, I don't know if the market has gone 5 bid or if somebody's just buying my offer. And for the most part, I don't want to be selling to the bank when it's 5 bid, because now I can offer sevens, and maybe there'll be an order that comes in to buy a couple and I can sell it a couple of points higher. It was more of a understood, relationship between the banks and the guys trading their own accounts, to recognize, we're not making those bids and offers because that's where we want to buy and that's where we want to sell. It's more that that's where the market is, and you're keeping it liquid for customers. Now, if a customer order came in at the same time, if I'm going 2 at 5, 2 at 5, and the guy who just fills orders for a customer comes in to buy two, we would honor that trade, sell it at the five, and if the market went higher, the market went higher, because really the goal is to protect the clients because that's where the order flow comes from. So it is what it is. Now, eventually, from the earpiece, the next transition in technology was handheld computers. Well, handheld computers started getting in the pit, and I kind of fought that transition and never took one of the computers. Not that it would have made a big difference because that was the beginning of the end of what was going on. And there was probably only about a year left of trading, and the trading wasn't nearly as good anyway. What eventually happened is the customers who were calling in and placing orders would start to feel more comfortable putting their own orders on a computer. Now, you guys, that's probably all you're used to is putting an order in on the computer. Well, this was long enough ago that computers were new enough, people were comfortable with it, but it wasn't all computerized trading. It was still calling your broker. Like it was new for the stuff on the computer and especially for the futures market. When the handhelds came in, you watched the market slowly and slowly get better and better to where they were competitive with the market in the pit, and then sometimes even better. And the writing should have been on the wall, but a lot of us, we just didn't see it because you didn't think that the technology would change like that. And what ends up happening is eventually all the customer orders started going to the computer, and the floor trading doesn't really exist anymore. It started slowly, but then it happened quickly. And if you're one of those people that was calling into the floor, isn't it much more comfortable for you instead of picking up the phone, calling the guy at the exchange, listening to what he's telling you the market's at, versus looking at a screen that has a market all the time and you can put your orders in, your bid, your offer, or however you want to place your trades. So eventually, the volume of trades started pulling out of the pits and going onto the computer screen. So, of course, like anything else, without knowing what I wanted to do and having that's what I've been doing for so long, eventually I would try to trade on the computer a bit. But the advantages of the floor became what are now disadvantages. Being able to offer and bid comfortably because if the market turns, they recognize that you don't really want to sell the market there. You're just trying to make liquidity for orders. On the computer screen, if the market turns, you're filled. So if I'm offering two at five and the market goes straight through there and goes five bid, six bid, seven bid, I'm filled at five. And on the floor, when that would happen, like I said, the bank traders would know that I wasn't really wanting to sell at five. I was just creating liquidity. So they would just walk in and go five bid. It was a really tough adjustment. And then I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And from there, it was super tough because you were so spoiled. The freedom of time management, the income that you're making at 20 some odd years old, and then even the excitement of the job and the learning and the camaraderie and everything else to go get a normal job was unbelievably difficult, which is why from there I had different things. Now, thank God I had done well enough and I had put away a good amount. And a lot of the people down there, they would just spend all their money. There was tons of drugs and partying and whatever else. And I didn't fall into that stuff and I was just so excited to be able to put money away and feel like I could live a really nice life for my age. But it wasn't nearly as extravagant as I realized it could have been. I was more excited about this, like I said, even when I was a kid, my laziness was make as much as I could so I could use that money to survive on. Now, I hadn't really figured it out with dividend checks at that time. So my first move when I started trying to figure it out was real estate. But I've gravitated and learned more about all of it over the years. It was such a great experience. I really wouldn't take it back or trade it for anything else. In fact, I kind of wish I hadn't gone to college and I had 4 years extra of trading because it was such a good job. But at the same time, I half wish that I just went out and got a job and had a normal type of progression in a workforce as some of my friends have had. So, who knows what's better or what's worse. Um, Fortunately, I've ended up in a decent spot. I feel like I've had some really lucky trades at some really lucky times, so to speak. You know, I've seen some markets really well. I sold my property in Chicago right before the correction, and Chicago didn't have quite as big a correction. But when we moved out to Las Vegas in 2005, I missed where the properties were really inexpensive, and thought we wanted to buy, but they started moving up so quickly. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I kind of said to her, we're going to rent for a while and see how this plays out, and was in a really fortunate position when the correction came, and then we were able to pick up properties then. So I've just been really fortunate off the floor too in terms of market timing, which is why I try to share some of that stuff. Um, but again, I I see price action. I pay attention to so many markets. Things that I watched when I was a kid. I'll watch markets for 20 or 30 years. Gold. I remember when I was tiny, which is why I say this stuff all starts when you're really little. If you're just interested in it. I remember when gold made the highs around 800 or so an ounce back in the 70s or early 80s. I was born in 72, so I was really young. I watched gold from then until the late 90s, early 2000s, when it was making its lows below $300 an ounce. And nobody was really talking about it, and it started getting in the news. And this is not a pat on the back. It's just most people don't pay attention for 30 years or see things that just become stagnant and stay continuing to watch them. In the back of my mind, all the things that I've noticed have really extreme moves. I'll sit and I'll watch for the next 10 or 20 years until nobody's watching them, and I don't still have it, so I don't, but I bought gold in under 300 an ounce. I was going on eBay. I got cheated a few times because they didn't send the gold. Got very frustrated, but bought some gold on eBay back then. And, by the time it was at 1400 an ounce, it gotten out of, 90 or 95% of it. But it's why I find that price action and watching things is more valuable than the data from the earnings and everything else. You have to pay attention to good companies that are solid, that you're not worried about going out of business. But they have these trends where people just forget about them. Great companies that just get out of favor, and the excitement's gone, and they sit for a while. That's what happened with Microsoft. It went up, it was exciting, it kept going, it kept going. Well, not a lot of people realize it had a big crash and fell and sat there for years and years and years before they went to the subscription model, and then they really started taking off again. That stuff happens. So anyway, I was asked to talk about the floor, not my life story. The floor was awesome. All the characters, all the fun. I miss those guys. I still stay in touch with a few of them, but not a whole bunch, and I wonder how some of them are doing. So have a great day. If you haven't already, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I rambled way too long. Smash the like button, make some comments. If you have questions about the floor, because I know I bounced around about a bunch, happy to answer them, happy to talk about it. I miss it. I loved it. And have a great day.